Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News. Now, Angry Birds already has a gaming and merchandising empire, but they want to expand even further into film, and the Angry Birds animated movie, is moving forward. Now, they signed 2 co-directors this week, which I'll talk about in a second, but what interests me the most about this story about an Angry Birds movie is that Rovio Entertainment, who makes the game, is doing it in-house. Now, of course, Microsoft infamously tried to do this with Halo. They were very dramatic. As I've talked about before, they sent out couriers dressed as Master Chief with the script to the different studios, but the studios felt that Microsoft wanted too much creative control and too big a piece of the financial pie to make it worth their time. And of course, we still have yet to get a Halo movie. It actually spawned District 9 because Neil Blomkamp was supposed to direct with Peter Jackson in talks for Halo, and when things went south with Microsoft, it spun off into, creating District 9. So Rovio, though, feels they can do it. And it would be interesting because I think this would be the first, at least high-profile case of a company really making a movie all by themselves without Hollywood's help. And this would be yet another instance where entertainment was taken away from Hollywood. They were already losing a big chunk of it. I talked to John Goldwyn on the carpet for Walter Mitty at the New York Film Festival last weekend on Saturday, and he talked about how Hollywood no longer has a captive audience, and they're competing in the digital age with a whole bunch of sources of entertainment, including YouTube, and so this would be another instance where someone may potentially get a large revenue and success in film or in just basically the entertainment industry without Hollywood having to be the gatekeepers. So, I don't know how I feel about that. I hope, as long as it's quality entertainment, then I think that's great then. So anyway, the co-directors are 2 animation veterans who never really quite made it to the big time in their respective companies, so they're taking this chance to spin off and co-direct Angry Birds. Their first is Clay Cadis, who was an animation supervisor on Tangled over at Disney, graduated to animator on Wreck-It Ralph, and now will be co-directing Angry Birds. And then the other person is Fergal Riley, a storyboard artist over at Sony Animation, who worked on Hotel Transylvania and also Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs 1 and 2. Now, I have the second person, Fergal Riley, is a little more interesting to me because storyboard artists, if you've watched the Beyond the Trailer behind-the-scenes tour of Blue Sky Studios, another big animation house, you'll see that the storyboard artist is really a story-heavy person. They kind of play with the story before it goes to the animators, work out all the kinks, explore where it could go. So I think that's a great person to bring up to directing. And I think, obviously, Clay Cadis has worked on some great projects with Wreck-It Ralph. I think Wreck-It Ralph might have a similar vibe even to Angry Birds. And so we'll see how these guys work as a duo. But it's very interesting. It's a big, bold move for them to leave their established animation houses to go to Rovio. But Angry Birds is a huge property. Question is, though, I have Angry Birds on my phone, but I played it for a while, but then I got to a level where I was like, it's impossible, and I just kind of gave up. And it's never been a huge thing for me personally. I've never been like, wow, it's not like Barry and Cloudy with a Chance of Meatballs, Barry the Strawberry. So I'm just wondering, for those of you who are big into the game, those of you who've bought the Angry Birds pillows and, have all the Angry Birds merchandise, do you want to see an Angry Birds movie? So we'll see how that develops, but Rovio Entertainment, let's see how big they can get. All right, so that's the first story of the day. The second story is that Peter Dinklage has gotten himself another movie, this time a starring role. Of course, he's a breakout star in Game of Thrones. He's most people, I would wager most people's favorite character on that show. He's certainly mine. And he is in X-Men Days of Future Past, but he's supposed to be the villain, Bolivar Trask. At least he's a villain in the comics. Peter Dinklage has flirted with the idea that maybe he's not a total all-out villain in the movie. We'll see. And that's a good instance of taking a role that was not made for, a little person, but they're giving it to Peter Dinklage and letting him run with it and do a great job because he's a fantastic actor and a great personality, very charismatic. So that's interesting to see that happen. But this new comedy that he signed on is 100% made for Peter Dinklage. Basically, it's supposed to be like Bad Santa, like kind of that in-your-face comedy, but it's going to be about a guy who tells people he's a real leprechaun. So I guess Peter Dinklage, of course, has to play off of his height. It's unfortunately unescapable. I hope he does well. He can be very funny. He's very funny on Game of Thrones. He's very, very good. I actually had the chance when I was going to Calgary Comic-Con up in Canada. We were on the same flight. So I got to talk to Peter Dinklage for about, I'd say actually good 15, maybe 20 minutes waiting for our flight, because I went up and I was very nice, and I was like, oh, we're both guests at this convention, and he was super nice. Everybody knew who he was at the gate, but everybody was a little nervous to go up to him, and after I started talking to him, some other people came up, and he was really nice to everybody, and he was really a cool guy, and just a really nice person, like one of those humble people who comes up in Hollywood and has to work their way, opposed to, I think, some people who make it big right away, who believe their own hype. I think Peter Dinklage is very, very grounded, very real. So I'm rooting for him. I think this is great. And I hope that he gets more roles, and I hope that they don't have to all be, tailor-made for him, so to speak, to his size. I mean, I don't begrudge him for taking this role. I think it could be really a big, successful movie. Because I think people are very much wanting to see anything with Peter Dinklage, but I hope he also gets to show his other facets as an actor, because he has them. He's a very diverse, very talented actor. All right, so that's the second story of the day. The third story is that Pixar, as you might have heard, is closing down their Pixar Canada branch. Now, and the Disney company said that it just wasn't cost effective, and a couple of factors people are saying went into that. First of all, it's not a huge loss, people are saying, because they only really did shorts up there. However, as some people also countered, Pixar shorts are a proving ground for new talent. People come up through there. It's an important first step for animators. And the other thing is that Pixar, of course, will not have a film in 2014. They've had to push the Good Dinosaur to 2015. It's caused Disney to have to rework their release schedule. Maleficent was moved to the original Good Dinosaur date at the end of May. And so people are saying Disney has to float Pixar for longer than they had expected with no incoming cash from a release, so they couldn't afford to keep that open. The other reason that I think Disney, I'm sure, is not big to play up is that Canada has changed and significantly lowered their incentives for Pixar being there, or financial incentives. And that's one of the reasons that Pixar opened up a branch in Canada in the first place. And the reason that I bring this up, and I think this is very interesting, is because there's been a lot of talk about films moving out of Hollywood, shooting in New York, shooting in London, shooting in China, shooting in Atlanta, shooting in places that give huge tax breaks. Czechoslovakia, has huge, it's much cheaper, and less and less movies are made in Hollywood. And so, but as you can see, as soon as the tax incentives go away, which lure these productions and offices to other parts of the world, Hollywood leaves immediately, and there's no loyalty built up. I mean, a lot of people are losing their jobs through Pixar Canada. I mean, I'm sure some people will relocate back to Pixar, but by and large, just a lot of people are left stranded. And I think that's kind of a callous way to do business, because I can't imagine the incentives were that huge when you're talking about just how much money that Pixar brings in and Disney has as a company. So I think it's interesting, and I think that other countries and other places shouldn't think that Hollywood is falling in love with them as a locale. It really is just all about the bottom line. And I'm very much a dollars and cents person myself. If there isn't a profit, if there isn't some kind of benefit, I can see why people wouldn't continue with something. Is the audience there? Is the awards there? Is the box office there? I think that's all very important. But at the same time, I think a company has to, there are livelihoods at stake, and sometimes it's just a question of whether or not, you should do the right thing. So, I mean, I'm sure there are other intricate elements at play here, but bottom line is Canada lowered its incentives, and Pixar then left. So, other countries, don't you change what you're giving Hollywood, because they will find another country like that. All right, so those are the three stories of the day. Today's question comes from Triz Carter. And Triz asks, hey Grace, quick question. Thank you, Triz. I have been noticing that some lesser-known movies have been having dual releases, showing in both the movie theater and on demand. Do you think this is the early stages of something new in Hollywood, or is this the ultimate kiss of death for a film? Thanks for your time. Thanks for asking, Triz. Okay, so some of you might know who get on demand. Now, movies are sometimes released day and date, or they're released even in advance on demand. And it's, they play it up on demand, be like, see it before you see it in theaters, and they charge a premium. For instance, I paid $10 to see Drinking Buddies at home rather than see it in the theater, and I'm glad I saved, that $4 or $5 because it was not even worth the 10. As I mentioned in my Inside Llewyn Davis, I rented it because I'm a big Jake Johnson fan, and Jake Johnson let me down. But anyway, I do think that this is still the kiss of death for a movie. I think that you'll only see it utilized. I mean, they're going to do it for 50 Shades of Grey. I think for films that maybe are perhaps, NC-17 or deemed, nobody wants to be seen going to the theater to see them, you'll see them on demand. Canyons was on demand, but that didn't really help Canyons, that Lindsay Lohan movie with that porn star James Dean co-starring alongside her. But I think that when you have a movie that's on demand and in theaters, that just means the movie is so small that they feel no one is going to see it. So they just, rush in and just want to get as many people to see it as possible, as quickly as possible, because they know it just doesn't have a shot in theaters. But I would say, that signals so much lack of faith in it that you're never going to see any of those movies do particularly well at the box office because of it. I think audiences go, well, I can just watch it at home. And also, I think they don't do particularly well in award season. I mean, Margin Call, did that. That was that Wall Street movie with, I think, Penn Badgley, and I think Zachary Quinto was in it, I believe. And I saw it, and it was, it was pretty good, and it had some Oscar buzz, but it never really got there, I think, because of the on-demand release. And of course, J.C. Chandler was the director, and he's doing All Is Lost this year with Robert Redford, and that isn't going on demand first. That'll go in theaters first. But, I mean, a lot of times you have investors who want to make their money back, so they just, bite the bullet and admit that their film just isn't a big, a heavy roller. But, as Hollywood gets more and more into blockbusters, and they're making these middle ground films, and, Sundance gets so competitive, they're kind of creating the subgenre, which is like movies made for on-demand, essentially. And they're not made for TV movies, they're like made for on-demand, so the quality's just a notch higher, but it is a whole different category, and I think you're going to maybe see some talent get stuck there, which is too bad. All Is Bright, for instance, just came out recently on both on-demand. A Single Shot with All Is Bright, it was the Paul Rudd, Paul Giamatti movie. A Single Shot was the Sam Rockwell movie. And I'll also tell you, behind the scenes, it's very hard to promote these movies because they come out a little bit earlier on demand, and so they're trying to get press for that, but then they can't get a second round of press from when the movie releases in theaters. It's just very hard to, if there isn't one single release date to focus around, it's very hard to cover it. And also audience interest is all over the map, because audiences kind of will get to it when they get to it. So it just creates like this black hole almost for a movie. And so I think while on paper it makes sense to release day and date, I still think it's the kiss of death. I still think it hurts a movie, and I think it hasn't. And someday it might be worked out, or if movie theaters just get that bad. I mean, I'd like to see somebody with a big star name, like 50 Shades of Grey. That might be the big test. Like a big movie, try it and see how that works. Because I'm having a lot of bad theater-going experiences. A lot of you have discussed it as well recently, so that's a big problem. So that's today's morning movie news. Thank you for tuning in. If you have any questions you'd like to see answered tomorrow or any stories you'd like to see covered, please write them down below. And this writing question first is great because it makes me be able to find them really fast. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye.